big stunner, 100. You stupid, just shut up. Keep breezy, I'm gonna. I'm big boy, dun dun.
All right, John.
Yes, sir.
I may be tired. I may miss words. I was up late. The big dog does not stay up late, and I hit the pillow at about midnight last night.
Okay. Partying hard? Going crazy?
Kind of.
Cake stands?
Went to a show last night. Went to a concert. I got to see Prof.
Yeah. Let's go.
Who's been my favorite kind of hip hop discovery of the last 6 months. Been just diving into his stuff, like where did this guy come from? So really cool show.
Sweet.
And yeah, no, I'd love to talk about that. And then we're going to talk fall traditions, because fall's coming. And next week, because we're going to talk about fall music. Like what are the tunes? But at the main topic today is I had a great interview with a good friend, therapist, psychology guru of mine, Mike Phillips. So that'll be the core of the show, but we'll do our normal kickoff here of just some topics du jour. But yeah, I'd love to report on the Prof show, and anytime we go to shows, I'd love to just kind of riff on what we saw.
Yeah.
But the first thing I have to say about Prof is when you see him live, and if you go to YouTube and watch like the videos he's made, you kind of look at the rest of hip hop artists and rappers out there, and you think, why are the rest of you just giving such low effort? Because Prof goes hard in every sense of the word. His lyrics go hard. His live performance went bonkers, and his videos and his style, like everything he does, he is putting in. You can feel the effort.
Okay,
all the rappers that rap about like I hustle and I go hard, I'm not sure I believe him anymore after kind of digging into Prof.
Yes, I agree, man. I have some things to say about that. But where did you see him? Was it a cool venue? Was it nearby? Where were you?
A few miles down the road, right on Burnside here, called Roseland Theater. So it's just a big concrete box, similar to in Austin. It reminded me a lot of the old Austin Music Hall. Sound quality was better, wasn't as echoey. Maybe because it wasn't as big. Probably 1,500 people in there. Sold out show. Standing, just a standing kind of flat with a little balcony of places to sit. So just that kind of venue.
Now, is this in Portland?
It's in Portland. Yep.
Okay.
So, it was one of the hip hop shows I've been to. It was definitely the whitest crowd, as Portland is the whitest major city in America. Technically, secondly, only to Boulder, Colorado, but it's not. I wouldn't say Boulder's a major city.
But he's got some white people in his crew, right?
Well, he's white.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The opening acts were not. His DJ Wonka is not. But yeah, you just would expect a white crowd in Portland. But man, he puts on a show. He's right up there, like some of the best hip hop shows I've seen. Definitely Run the Jewels, just destroys. Anytime you can see any Wu-Tang Clan member or Wu-Tang themselves, they kill.
Yes.
And the best ever was still to this day, 1995 Ill Communication Tour, Beastie Boys. Absolutely the best. And I think a lot of that is because they have instruments and everything on stage for every song. So it's very dynamic.
That was my next question. Did he have any instruments on his stage?
Just a DJ who was kind of DJing, more or less just playing tracks. And so, pretty basic setup. The two opening acts, the first one, the second one, actually, the first one was a rapper named Norman Sann, S-A-N-N. And I will link up some tracks. I'll drop a couple in the Suburban Kings playlist on Spotify. But he impressed me, which is hard to do in a hip hop show when you're, unheard, never heard him. Yeah. I wanted to go in cold. I didn't go and listen to the opening acts. I often do, but this one I kind of wanted to go in cold. I didn't listen to his tracks, and his presence, his delivery, his lyricism, his tracks. It was good. And he was just playing to a track. He just had a guy back there, hit and play kind of thing. And it worked.
It's always awesome.
Slayed.
Yeah. It's always awesome to go to a show and discover a new artist through the opening acts.
Love that. So he did great. I'm going to be spinning his stuff all week. And his biggest play, I'm looking over here on Spotify right now, is only 800,000 spins. So this is a new discovery. I'm looking forward to digging into Norman Sann. And then the second opening act was a rapper named Grip. He's from Atlanta. And I just did not did not deliver. It was low effort, talked a ton between every song. And that usually kind of that kills the vibe. What little energy you're creating in the room, especially coming on after Norman Sand, who just, you could tell the crowd got into it. And I assume many of us hadn't really heard his stuff, and he won the crowd. He won the room. And then Grip, the second act, really just, it felt like he phoned it in. And it kind of brings me to this idea I want to hear from you, because you've been to hip hop shows.
Yeah.
Is oftentimes they are low effort. Sometimes that's intentional, because there's this pressure to seem cool, and by way of going, this is easy for me, and I'm relaxed, But if you're trying to win a room full of people who have never heard you, you have no credibility. You have to win us over. You have to punch us in the chest with your music, and you got to make it happen. I've been to tons of hip hop shows where, you have an opening act, or maybe it's, a festival like ACL, and they just can't read the room. They can't, they're trying to play it cool. It's just low effort. And it's a bummer. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I think there's a big difference between festival shows and just going to a single standing, show at a little venue. It's a totally different vibe. And it feels like at a festival show, you have all these stages, and everybody, it feels like it's fairly contrived. Yeah. Where it's like each stage is going simultaneously, and it's like walking through a strip mall where there's all these brands of musicians, and they're just, it feels very performance driven versus just, being in the moment, being in the space. Maybe the space is just too big for itself. But with what you're talking about with low effort, man, I walked away from the past. I've been to 2 hip hop shows. I actually went to 3, but I actually dropped my kids off and just hung out around the venue while they did their thing. But I've been to 2 shows recently, and it's been a while, and I had to tell myself, okay, have an open mind and allow for the experience in and of itself to engage me, and just be more observant, just taking it all in. Because if I didn't take that approach, I think I would just be stuck in my old man judgments of like, they don't know hip hop, and like, this is goofy, and, kids lost it today. But for me, I was super curious. Like, my kids were very excited, and they're teenagers. This is their time. And I wanted to see what was going on in these spaces, in these environments for them, that was engaging them and driving them. So right off the bat, the thing that threw me off with what you're talking about, I think for me, what I felt with this low effort was the lack of actual instruments. Like, I saw, that could be part of it. I saw the Roots, very instrumentally driven. And to me, those instruments totally engaged me, because the musicianship of that is a big part of the artistic expression, and how well you spin off of the energy between the crowd and the stage, and you build into that, and you do things that are a little off the beaten path of the album. Yeah. It's like exciting, like, oh, cool, they're doing something a little different, or they meshed these 2 songs together, or they worked in like a cover in here. And it was just cool how they would do that. And I saw, who's Andre 3000? Outkast. I saw Outkast, and they had crazy, like, they had some funk stuff going on. And so those were some shows that I saw that really stood out to me, with like musicianship, artistry, performers. So I go to these venues in Austin. There's a place called Emo's. It's a long time place. They've actually since moved from when I was in high school over to the east side. So it's like this Emo's 2.0, where it felt, is it better like, or worse?
I've been to the original Emo's.
Well, it feels like a restaurant that's successful, and they need to go build the same restaurant on the other side of town. So it feels a little more like commercially around the edges. It's lacking like the crust, and like the barnacles in the bathroom.
The patina is gone. Yeah.
Yeah, like the character is kind of missing, but it was cool. It was actually a good venue for what it was. We saw a rapper named Lil Tecca. I don't know if you know who Lil Tecca is.
I spun a little bit of that when you mentioned it a few weeks back.
So we saw Lil Tecca, and there's 2 or 3 songs of his that were that are good. I mean, one of my sons used one of his songs as his walk-up song for baseball, to kind of warm up to go. So went in there, and this lack of effort that you're talking about, it just hit me so hard because the stage was pretty barren. Like there wasn't really anything on the stage. There was minimal lights. There was some freestanding like slides on some screens on the wall that didn't really do a whole lot. And so what really drove the experience was the MC and the rapper or the DJ. But the DJ, he didn't have like the vinyl, like he wasn't spinning nothing.
No, he's just playing tracks, basically.
Yeah, and that's it. He would get on his mic and he would yell some things to the crowd to get them hyped up. And then he would, I could literally see his hand like hit play. Yeah. And then they would go and then he'd get back on his mic. And so I like looked at my buddy who went with me and I'm like, man, it's literally like they're just hitting like a playlist right now. And they're just rapping over like their song. And there were times literally where the opening acts in particular were playing their song and that the actual rapper was running on either side of the stage, hyping up the crowd, but the crowd was reacting really well to it. Yeah. Like it felt like a crazy kind of house party where they were playing the music. They're running on either side of the stage, hyping up the crowd, and the crowd would jump up and down or kind of, they would say part the crowd. They were trying to create some like mosh pits. Yeah. Which that's, kind of unique at a hip hop show. And so then I went and saw one at Stubbs. And this to me felt like I was walking in to a metal show. Like I thought I was going to see some hardcore death metal just by the crowd itself walking in. Like people, they had like the fishnet, like gloves on, fingerless. They had like the metal spikes coming out of their hat. Yeah. So one dude was wearing like a Pikachu onesie, like a Pokemon outfit. One dude had a mohawk, and it was like walking in. I thought it was super cool because it felt like a celebration of diversity. Like people were showing up in this kind of altered ego, but also their kind of true self or expression of themselves. And so I looked at my son, I'm like, I feel like I'm in the Fortnite like battle bus right now because everybody's in their little skin. Like everybody had their little different skin on. And so it felt like a metal show and the energy of it was metal. They were moshing. Kids were coming out of the crowd with a bloody nose. Like one kid literally came out and his arm was broken, and the security crew is like pushing people out of the way.
That's what I'm talking about. Let's go.
Yeah. But the craziest part about it is the guy we went to see, Ken Carson. He's hard. But the thing is he was doing the same thing. He had this makeshift scaffolding. Like literally like paint was on it. There was just some boards of wood with like these plain pipes put together. And he stood up there and he was like hanging onto the pipes, like yelling over the crowd like this overlord. And they were totally in it and totally reacting. But it was just him. And most of the time the lights were off on him. So you saw the silhouette of this angry guy. Right. And the crowd was going crazy, and there was no drums, no guitar, no brass instruments.
But he could
carry
the energy
hard. Yeah. So that to me was what the visible lack of effort that is different now from those experiences, noticeably different than back when I saw the Roots, back when I saw Wu-Tang Clan, back when I saw, Outkast and some of the rappers that I grew up on. And like, well, okay, these stages are just so barren. And it's just these guys running back and forth, hyping up a crowd over their track. That was my experience.
Yeah, no, I think it's not so much that they don't have a band on stage and they're not using instruments, but I think that's not the issue. But I think that may be part of the cause in some cases, because if you have a band, even if it's just a stripped down band, maybe a drummer, a bass player, and a DJ or something like that, you have to rehearse. You have to rehearse with other people, which means you're going to get input from other people, and you're also going to edit yourself, and you're going to actually think more about the performance. Where if you're just rehearsing by yourself to your track, you know, in your house, and you're just you're probably focusing more on the lyrics versus the energy and thinking about the room. So I don't think it's so much the lack of instruments. It's just the lack of understanding what I'm doing from a rehearsal standpoint might be part of it. Apart from just trying to create this ethos of I'm cool and I got this, you know, and looking like I'm not trying is part of my energy. And that's just, if you're trying to win a crowd of people who don't know you, you've already lost. So interesting. But yeah, Prof killed it. Great live performer, understood it. Obviously the room knew him and knew his tracks and were just rapping along to every single lyric and going nuts. And that's probably the only thing that bugged me sometimes is like, you know, I'm older. I'm not in there mixing it up. I don't know all the lyrics. I'm almost 6'6", so I just sit in the back and just enjoy it, you know, and I kind of rap along a little bit here and just kind of bob my head. I'm trying to listen and I want to hear him perform, but a lot of times, you know, sticking the mic out there and letting the crowd rap a bar or two. And it's just like, you know, I get a little bit annoyed there, but
I hear you. I was at a Radiohead show and they came out and, you know, encore time. It was the moment Paranoid Android kicks up and this dude literally right next to me. Just, I mean, it was his moment. Because he laid into it.
Were we at that show together?
Were we? I
think we were at Irwin,
the guy to the right of me.
Yep. Yeah.
He was singing along to it so hard that like I couldn't hear, you know, the performance. And this dude was tone deaf. And I could say I was there with you. We were there together. But I saw it, but the dude next to me kind of, man, he made it about him, and it kind of took away from the Tom York a little bit.
Man,
he didn't have the same whale.
Hip hop guys, some of you got to work up, rehearse. You know, get out there in a crowd, win the room, man. Especially when you're an upstart, man. You got to do that. You know, you're not. You know, it's easy when everyone knows your lyrics, but seeing Run the Jewels in a festival at ACL. They won the crowd. They came out and they just punched everybody in the chest and just went hard. That's, you know, that's awesome.
One thing while we're on this topic, have you heard of Harry Mack?
Harry Mack? I have.
Harry Mack.
Yeah.
On Instagram. His viral videos of freestyle on the street it blows my mind. It gives me like
sent me some of that. Yeah.
It gives me like chills in the way that he'll like work the crowd. He's on the street. People look at him like, you're out standing on the street ready to freestyle. You can see him like, whatever, dude. And he's like, okay, Bucky's. Okay, remember that. And then he'll like, okay, black shirt. Remember that. And he'll work the crowd and he'll start freestyling. And it's so good. And he starts, he's creating in the moment and it feels so pure. And the flow is like there. And so, man, Harry Mack, he is worth a follow.
I'll link it up. Link it up, Harry Mack, in the show notes for sure.
He is crazy at
algorithms hit me.
His freestyle is sick.
Awesome. So next topic, another quick topic before we get to our Mike Phillips interview. But you had something you wanted to bring up as we slide into October.
Yep. That's it. Slide it on in the October DMs. Here we go. So having young kids, I still have a couple young kids, you know, my 3rd grade, 7th grade, and then freshman, sophomore. We're kind of hanging on to these family fall traditions that made the childhood and young parenting so much fun. And your kids are all grown up. And so maybe fall traditions. Let's talk a little bit about fall traditions that you did with your kids and or you still look forward to, or you're going to do this fall. I'm curious.
Well, I want to cut out Halloween. That's different. That's for later. Because
Okay. Let's cut it
Halloween, that's off limits for this one, because that's the fall tradition. That's amazing. Halloween's the best holiday of the year. Fight me. For us, my kids, I raised my kids in Texas, so they had a different experience of fall than I did. But the days are getting shorter, and you're trying to maximize, that sort of thing. And one thing that my kids and I would do is, the first time it would, we lived right by a green belt there in the north part of Austin, like right on it. We could just walk 100 yards and we're into the juniper trees there. They call them cedars in Texas, and oak trees, and there's creeks and stuff. And it's kind of a desert environment. But the first time you'd get a nice cold rain, and it would just kind of rain all day, we would go hike back in there. I think I brought your kids through there one time, just because the place comes alive, and there's little wet weather. There's creeks that only exist when it's raining, and it's very rocky there. So the creeks are really clean. Not where if you live in the South where there's a lot of dirt, when there's rain, the creeks just turn into chocolate milk. Where in Central Texas, they're very clear because there's no dirt there. It's just rock. And so we'd take the dog, and there'd be nobody out there. So we could just take over and just go, because I love nature. And it was in Texas, as we've said before, is just naturally a violent place. Like nature does not want humans to interact with it. But when it got cool and it got wet, it would just soften up, and it would show you a different side of itself. And just to go out there, and just splash around and just walk through and just experience it. Like that's one thing when I think of fall in Texas that I often think about in terms of food and things like that. There's a couple meals I like to prepare when it gets cold, one of which is like a potato soup that my family loves. But for me, when someone says fall and I think about being a kid, the first thing that comes to mind, and this is going to sound funny because I didn't watch football, but football. When I think of fall, I think of a football game playing in the other room and the low hum of the crowd, and John Madden saying stupid shit. And I'm in the other room, and the light's low. It's getting dark earlier. And I lived in Northern California, and the light is already beautiful in Northern California. It gets extra beautiful in the fall. It just gets low and just hangs for a long part of the day. And your eyes would just get heavy. It's cool. The window would be open. And for me, fall is falling asleep on the couch in the other room while football is humming away in the other room. So to this day, I have this Pavlovian response when a football game is on TV. It makes me sleepy. So maybe that's one reason I didn't watch TV. But that's kind of the first thing I would think of fall. But one thing I suck at, and it's what I always appreciated about you, is you have a better connection to the things normal people do, where my wife and I have always sucked at that stuff, like going to things, whether it be a parade, like going to the pumpkin patch or cutting down the Christmas tree, like events. And I think for me, it's because I grew up skateboarding and surfing and, riding bikes. I do a lot of intense stuff. So everything short of that is tough for me to engage with. Plus I have ADHD. So really passive, calm, like going to watch something, nightmare for me. So it's one of my failings as a parent is I didn't take my kids to a lot of things because my wife and I didn't like them. I think her background is just being drugged around the world by her parents. So she has trauma from going to things. And for me, I just don't know how to go to things. Yeah. So when I think of we're going to go to the pumpkin patch or Northern California, we're going to go pick apples, in the fall. And it's like, for me, I'm like, well, no, I'm good. Like, we're good. Let's go play. Let's go be physical somewhere. So we don't really have them. We don't have the fall traditions. It's just, that's us. What's your family doing?
Well, quick question. Yes or no? Pumpkin spice?
I love it. I had a pumpkin spice muffin with the cheese, like a cheesecake smeeshed into it at this bakery by the farmers market down the road. You go to farmers market in Portland on Sunday, as you do, and I like to get there early, go to the bakery, and I love pumpkin spice. I don't do the latte, but yeah, I love pumpkin pie. And the pumpkin muffin. I think even Starbucks has a pretty solid pumpkin muffin.
Yeah. I saw a video on Instagram the other day where this guy unintentionally takes a big like swig of his wife's pumpkin spice coffee, and he takes a sip of it and he chugs it. And he's like,
and he loves it.
What was that? And she said, babe, that's my pumpkin spice. And he pirouettes and like dances his way outside and he like hugs a puppy and like it just made me laugh because like, dude, I actually look forward to that first pumpkin spice in my coffee. It's
delicious.
And
it's
just
delicious.
like eggnog. I'm not going to sit around and drink all the eggnog, but I look forward to just a cup of eggnog. Like that's just the mark of like.
I'm pretty much the only other one of the family. My daughter might have a sip. I'll have a glass of eggnog at Christmas time. Yeah.
And so like those are the flavors, right? So
pro tip, learn from experience. Don't try to make a latte out of eggnog. The steam curdles the egg, and you basically have scrambled eggnog.
No,
gross.
scrambled nog.
Do not want that.
Yeah. I'm with you as far as the outdoors go. At the tail end of the summer, I'm looking forward to what happens in the lake with the fishing. There is a fall bite. The fish want to start getting fat because their systems are going to slow down and they're going to be less eager to get that meal. And they'll be more eager. They're motivated to go, hit a bait that's bigger than smaller, and the bigger fish load up. So, like, usually there's this fall bite. So I look forward to the game that a fisherman plays with the bass fishing. Yeah, we live on a lake, Lake Travis, on the outside of Austin, and so it's so cool to live on the lake because it's ever changing. And being a fisherman, you're playing hide and seek with these fish, and what you think is going to work 1 month or couple of weeks isn't going to change it isn't going to work the next couple of weeks. So fall bite's cool. Looking forward to that. I'm with you. You took us out on that hike, and that when you said that, I thought to myself immediately, I have to in the next couple of weeks take my kids outdoors for some falls, like a hike or a sleep out or camp out, and make that happen. But my kids are at that age, or maybe our boys are past it now.
A little tougher. It's not cool, teenagers. Yeah.
And then leaning towards some of those event things. There's a little farm on the outside of town where we live, and they do a pumpkin patch.
Sweetberry farms.
Sweetberry farms.
Yeah.
And they have a corn maze, and then the seasonal stuff. It's good for some pictures, and so look forward to that. But to me, with that, it's not even so much just the destination of the place. Like the drive out there and the stop at the gas station and some of the arguing or
grab
meaningful
some barbecue on the way home.
Yeah. Like the whole experience is the time together that make it what it is. And so
it's crisis bonding.
It is. Oh yeah. It's crucible.
Yep.
Safety is not guaranteed. We may not all make it back.
Yeah, there's got to be some risk. Yeah.
So look forward to that. And then, grab a pumpkin, carve up a pumpkin, get your hands dirty, let the kids, grab a tool and start sawing it up, cutting it up, and let them just do their pumpkin thing, let it rot on the front porch. And that's part of it, man.
Yeah.
Got to do that.
And lastly, for me, when it starts getting cold and it starts getting dark earlier, it's basketball season. Basketball season's coming, and that's this week. I think we'll get our first NBA preseason games this weekend.
Some big trades.
My daughter's first practice over at Oregon State kicked off this week, so they start official practices, and so just looking at the schedule, planning what games to make it to, and basketball is kind of now, is important to our life, not just because our kids played it and our daughter still plays it at a very high level. But I love college
sport.
basketball and NBA full stop, watching WNBA playoffs right now. It's cold means basketball.
Yeah.
And so that's fall for us. That's fall for us. But way cool. So just to introduce Mike Phillips. Mike Phillips is mental health professional. He'll talk about his specialty in the interview. But I met Mike in 2003, 2004. He was doing a session at a conference I was at on spirituality and meditation, and it was profound. And we hit it off immediately. And so since then, now we're talking 20 years, we've been, sharing books and helping each other out with contacts. And he's just kind of one of those people who I admire his wisdom. I admire the way he engages the universe. And so he's a creative mind and a brilliant guy, and has some great things to say. And so we kind of walk through, on the heels of me talking about my journey with depression a couple episodes ago. We talked through that. He deals in a couple specialties, and part of it, his training is in the trauma space, although he's focused on a different specialty mostly these days. But we also talk about creativity and art and how that's important to just brain health and mental health, because that's as we try to stay on that topic here on the podcast, staying in touch with the arts and culture. And so Mike and I wrap up the interview talking through those sorts of things, how he interacts with creativity, how humans need to, have outlets for consuming art or creating things. So really, really cool interview. I think you're going to like it.
Big stunner, 100. You stupid, just shut up. Keep breezy, I'm big boy, done.
All right, Mike, where in the world do we find you today?
I am right now in Sacramento, California, the capital.
Is that home? Is that where you grew up?
Oh, no. I grew up in Canada. I grew up in British Columbia, in the middle of British Columbia, which this summer was on fire, unfortunately, for about the fourth time in 5 years. And then I traveled about Canada until I was in my early 30s. Then I moved to Montana and then California. So I've been in California for 25 years.
So so a long time. What brought you to the United States? Was it school, a girl? What was it?
No, I was already married. I mean, a girl brought me. No, that's too long a story. Let's just say I went there for a job. I was a pastor at the time, but I was also working on my master's degree in psychology. I was planning to be a research psychologist as well as a pastor. Pastoring was supposed to be part-time, and it didn't become that. It became full-time because by some metrics, I became successful at it. And because of that, the churches grew too big for me to do it part-time. And so I ended up I came down to Sacramento for the same thing to finish the degree. I'm supposed to get this third year of this degree, and I never did get it. So I got 2 years. It allowed me to open some doors for as a therapist, and then I got some certifications and other things. That's a long story, but I moved to Montana. I moved out of Canada because I wanted more education.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of us have a similar story where, we were just kind of wandering through life with a vague idea of where we wanted to end up, and circumstances, and that's kind of my story. Just the economics, so the reality of economics caused us to make decisions, move to places, do things, and that's really steered my life as well. So I totally get it. Well, in the area of psychology, mental health, what is your specialty?
Right. So I have two. When I was getting my degree up in Canada, was working with one of the colleges with the University of British Columbia. My degree was in research, but it had a particular flavor in sexual abuse of children. Okay. And so my first internship was with the correctional system in British Columbia, and working with sex offenders, because very few people worked with sex offenders. And so I got trained and got my certification as a sex therapist, which was required to work with sex offenders. So part of my practice is as a sex therapist, but out of that came, and especially with my work with churches, came a specialty in trauma therapy. So actually my main focus is trauma therapy. I use several fairly recent modalities to work with trauma patients.
And what do you mean by modalities?
Okay, so there's a number of ways that therapists can work on traumatic problems. And within the last 25, 30 years, a lot of those focus on how the body and the emotions are drastically connected to trauma. That it would take a long time to go into it, but let's just say every part of our being is affected by trauma, even to our DNA, and that's a whole different sidetrack. But everything about us is affected by trauma. But up until maybe the 80s, the only methodologies, the only modalities, so to speak, for dealing with trauma were talk therapy. That is, were interactive therapy with a therapist. There wasn't a lot of therapy that was done to help release some of that trauma out of the body, release some of the trauma out of the emotional centers of the brain. Probably the first one was a therapy called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and that was the first.
That sounds fancy.
Yes, essentially, it came from an accidental discovery that was made that the bilateral, that is, the two sides of the brain during trauma tend to shut down the connection between them in order to make it easier for the person to endure what they're going through. There's reasons for that. We call it the freeze response, but in the freeze response, the little tiny walnut-shaped organ in the middle of the brain called the hippocampus, which is what integrates information from the left side to the right side, it just stops doing that. And so traumatic memories become chaotic. That is, they can't be reprocessed by the brain, so they stay in chaotic form. So the traditional thing that people would understand about that would be a soldier who comes back from the battlefield and then has these horrible reactions at night or thinks that they're on the battlefield still. It's because the brain can't get a context to what happened. It's stuck in two different places in the brain that aren't communicating. So what they discovered was if you force the hippocampus to work, and there's some really cool ways to do that. One is simply having a light go back and forth on a screen and a person's eyes following. That eye movement can actually force the hippocampus to start working. And then you process as a therapist, process with the person, the hippocampus then begins the process of desensitizing the trauma and then reprocessing what happened. There's a lot more to it. And they found that almost anything, it doesn't even have to be eye movement. You can, there's something called a theratapper, which is just little buzzers that you hold in each hand. And even that back and forth, right, left, bilateral stimulation will force the hippocampus to engage in the memory again. And if it's done properly, if it's done with a certain level of expertise, the person doesn't experience the trauma. They were actually able to process it and move past it. So that's that was the first methodology that I went into. And then
question on that.
Others. Yeah, go ahead.
Question on that. What do we think is the evolutionary benefit to the hippocampus shutting down? Why does our brain do that?
Okay, nobody really knows for sure. Probably the standard theory right now is that in the moment that these things are happening, if you take the biology of mammals in general, right? Yeah. Our brain automatically makes a choice between three gates when we're in trouble. Fight, that is, if our brain feels like we're in a dominant position, we'll fight. Right. Or flee, which is if we feel we're not in a dominant position, we run away. Or the third one is if we can't fight or flight, we freeze. And so you see this with animals. Let's say a deer crossing the highway, and a car's coming with headlights. The animal doesn't know which direction to run, and it doesn't know if it'd be safe to run, and it can't fight, so it freezes. And that's what often happens with, we call it the deer in the headlights thing. So this is, unfortunately, we're mammals, and so when we're take a child, for instance, who's being abused by a parent, and I apologize if somebody's listening to this and the trigger warning, but if somebody's being abused by a parent, they have no power, they have no authority, so they can't fight back, and they can't run away because this is their caregiver. So what often happens for a child is they freeze. And it isn't just a physical freezing, and it is that, but also the brain doesn't know what to do. So it kind of stops the processing. It doesn't allow the person to fight or to run away. And that's central nervous system reactions. And it shuffles all of it off to the corner, so to speak, so the person isn't a threat to the person who's abusing them. Unfortunately, then, like if it was a non-traumatic experience, the next day we might look back and say, oh, that's what happened. Oh, okay, mom didn't mean that, or dad didn't mean that, or whatever. But for a lot of people, they just lay it aside and don't come back to it. The problem is it's still there. And so at times...
Is it common to not be able to even see, for lack of better, that memory, or even know that it happened? Like forget
not see it as a in context, right? So here's the problem. Again, let's take the soldier coming back from battle. He's going into a store, and as he's going into the store, a car backfires, and all of a sudden he ends up jumping behind a bush because his reactivity to the sound is out of context for when it originally happened, but his brain can't make that contextual connection because it didn't process the original memory. So the sound is taken out of context, and the same thing can happen with a word or a color or any number of different triggers can trigger that initial memory. But when a person can process the memory, that is, they can go through it piece by piece, desensitize it so it isn't having this high reactivity. Right. Then they keep it in context. Then they say, "Oh, that was then. This is now," and that becomes it's a life changer for people who have trauma. Not everybody with trauma develops PTSD. This is what we're talking about. Not everybody develops that. About 40% do, though. And so for the 40% of people who develop PTSD out of trauma, EMDR became a very helpful methodology to use. And it's still being used today, and it was developed in the mid-1980s. So it changed psychology.
That's really cool. One other question that popped in my head is, does that response from the hippocampus, is that limited to like acute experiences, like an intense singular experience? Or can it happen over time, where I think of like someone who's stuck in a job that is very mildly traumatic, like maybe it's just incredibly boring and just wearing them down. Does it happen there, or is that a different kind of response?
I don't know about a job. Well, it could be with a job. Right. Let's take somebody who's in an abusive marriage over a long period of time, right? Right. We call that complex PTSD. That is, there's no one event that gets triggered. And yes, you can use PTSD for it. You can use EMDR for it. You tend to go into what are called typical events in that marriage. So we will ask a client, is there a typical event in your relationship with so-and-so that would be problematic? Like instead of one big dramatic one, is there kind of a typical one? And so we'll do EMDR with a typical one, and all of a sudden the others kind of fall into line with, so it isn't, I should qualify, it isn't just desensitizing this traumatic memory, but then we go back in afterwards and we replace maybe false beliefs with what the person has now come to learn to be more accurate and true for their life. So we call that positive cognition. Yeah, we retrain the brain. Yeah, because often the original experience, let's say they had a narcissistic spouse who took control, and they may believe, I will never have control over my life. That would be a typical negative cognition. So then we go back in and help the version of them stuck in that memory would say, no, actually, in the years following, you do find out that you have control of your life. So that would be an example of what we do. And it releases that negative cognition out of their mind.
That's incredible. So then,
it really is.
And then, we were talking modalities. Is there other kind of important modalities you're using these days?
Well, there's two that really work well with trauma. One is called internal family systems, and that's part of a larger group of psychological modalities. Basically, the idea that
my daughter is studying that
IFS. Okay, yeah, excellent. Yeah, well, IFS believes that the mind is a multiplicity. That there are many parts to our mind, not just to our brain. I mean, we know the brain has many different parts, but the mind kind of segments off subpersonalities to deal with specific functions, mainly protection functions, right?
Right.
So something like anxiety is actually a part of your mind that is given the job of predicting the future so that you're prepared for it. Anxiety is a very important part of our mind, and we have vilified it for a long time.
Right. No, as someone who anxiety led to my depression, I totally get that. But IFS, and there was another one you were going to mention.
Yeah, somatic experiencing. There's a book that came out in 2014 called The Body Keeps the Score. Bessel van der Kolk and his team put it together. And essentially what it was saying is our bodies are holding on to so much trauma. We see it in autoimmune diseases. We see it in joint problems, in back problems, migraine headaches. And so a number of modalities were mentioned in that book. And one of them is somatic experiencing. And that is learning what your body is telling you about the trauma you're still holding on to. And so through that, it emphasizes listening to your body and then actually releasing some of the trauma out of your body. Yoga is used in that, but sometimes just stretching. But it's very deliberate. It's part of a sequence of events. It isn't just start stretching and your life will be better. It's a little more complicated than that. But these three, EMDR, somatic experiencing, and internal family systems, are forming a bedrock for probably most of the trauma therapy that's being done right now.
That's incredible. Yeah, I know that last one resonates with me a lot because what led to my diagnosis and treatment and moving forward and being healthy was my body. That was how I reacted. I think, and maybe it's because I'm a very kinesthetic, active person, and I started getting, autoimmune issues.
Oh, sure.
And that's what led to, and I don't have arthritis. I don't have any autoimmune disease. Right. But that's where it revealed itself. So totally
if I can just add one thing to that, and I appreciate you sharing that because that's where most people will see it is in their immune system. The immune system is the protection system for our body, and so when the person goes through trauma, they feel unprotected, and they never stop feeling unprotected unless they process the original trauma. So the body goes looking for something to fight, and it doesn't see anything out there, so it starts attacking itself. And unfortunately, it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense to the body. And in addition to that, the largest nerve in your body is the vagus nerve. And for a long time, we didn't know what the vagus nerve really did. It extends, all the way from the base of your brain to your groin. And it has two branches. One goes towards your face and like that. The other goes down in your core. That vagus nerve is the primary responsibility for storing up trauma. Yeah. Now, that's not what it was originally for. And often it's used for the fight or flight response. And the resolution of that fight or flight response, we call that the parasympathetic system. That once the trouble is over, we have that sense of I can relax. Well, what if that person never gets that sense of I can relax? Well, then they store it up in their body. They literally tighten up and freeze in their core, and this is what causes so many health problems. And that was me. These modalities, that's what happened.
And in the American healthcare system, it was a 3-year journey to figure it out. It wasn't until just the optometrist, when I went in because I had an autoimmune thing affecting my eyeball, my body decided to attack my eyeball. Right. And that was the first medical professional to look me in the eye and go, "Are you depressed?" And wow, that started my journey. And this is 3 years into it, and so it was, it kind of sad, which really leads me into one thing I want to talk to you about is for people that are listening, what are signs I need to seek therapy? What's that look like? When do I just need to go? Because I didn't know it. I was too busy with life. And it took me, and plus my upbringing, and you have a similar one where I grew up with religious trauma and an evangelical household where mental health wasn't a thing. Right. So I had that on top of all that. So it took me even extra time to figure out I needed to seek help. What do people need to be looking for?
Well, I mean, that's a broad question. What I have seen when people come to therapy is they have a growing sense that there's something out of control in their life.
Yeah.
Okay. There are thoughts that just don't seem to come under their control. Those might be depressive thoughts, anxious thoughts, thoughts of self-harm, obviously would be part of that. But it could also be habits that just they want to solve them, but they can't. That is eating disorders or workaholism. But then if you start adding autoimmune problems on top of that, it's very rare for a person to have multiple autoimmune problems that can't trace them back to some kind of trauma or at least some kind of pain that has not been resolved. The other thing is if people who are really close to you consistently say, I think you need to get some help, I would take that seriously.
Yeah, no, definitely. And my story, I think, is similar to a lot of people with depression where, I've always been the funny guy, the guy that brings life to the party. And I still am that, and I embrace that, and I own that as that's who I am. If I'm not having fun, I'm not doing whatever this is, because why not? Life should be fun is one thing I've learned over the last 10 years, especially. Just have freaking fun. If it's not fun, change something, because that's what's beautiful. And it really is a big reason we started this podcast is I want people to have fun, but you got to get yourself straight first. And then one thing I've said, Mike, I'm not a doctor. I don't have experience in this, but one thing my primary doctor put me on an SSRI immediately. Like, let's get you on his theory. And I agreed with it at the time. And I still think it's probably right for some people. Let's get you on medication now, stop the bleeding. And then we'll start working through this and figure out what the root cause is. So it took, from that point on, it really took about a year to get to my diagnosis, which is actually fairly common for middle-aged men like myself, where untreated ADHD led to anxiety, led to depression. And so now I treat my ADHD, and it's game-changing.
Right.
So medication is, how do we help people get over some of the stigmas of that?
Well, medication is often the immediate intervention for exactly what you said, for stopping the bleeding. So when it comes to anxiety and depression, which are the two main presenters for people who are struggling with a lot of issues, there comes a tipping point psychologically where they can't get on top of it. Where in IFS we say that those parts have blended with their core identity. They can't unblend by themselves. It's the old joke that Benjamin Franklin said, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's amazing how many people don't realize that was a joke. He didn't, you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? But that's what people try and do, and eventually at some point that depression or the anxiety, which is actually just a part of your psyche that was actually meant to help you, it is overwhelming. It's blending with your core identity. You need something to create some separation between your core identity and that part, and medications do that. SSRIs, selective other SNRIs. There's other ones that can do it, but after a period of time, though, if therapy is not brought into it, also if cognitive therapy of some kind isn't brought in, then eventually this depression or anxiety is going to reemerge, and then you can only increase the medication so much, right? And then it's gonna be a point of diminishing returns. And so but medication is the first thing for a lot of people. They really need to do that.
Right. And one of the other symptoms, and this is as we kind of steer more towards a lot of the things we like to talk about here, mental health is something we talk about almost every episode. I like to bring up a study and kind of share some thoughts. We just talked about teen brain development coming out of the pandemic on this week's episode.
Wow.
But I like to steer back to like creativity, because for me, and some of the other people I know who are, I'm mentoring a gentleman right now who's going through a similar battle I did. We tend to walk away from the things that were core to us, that gave us life. And for me, that was, I couldn't read books for about 2 years. I couldn't sit down and read a book. And I love reading. And it was tough, and that hurt. And then, I kind of stepped away from my consuming of new arts. I would fall back and I would just watch the same movies, because it was familiar. I knew how that,
it was safe.
Where's it, in your experience, where's that connection? Where, when do we walk away from art creativity that normally gave us life, and how do we re-engage it? What's the mental health components of that?
Okay, so part of the problem with our modern understanding of art, and many people have talked about this. This isn't my theory, but part of the problem is that we have monetized art. Of course, we've said that don't do art unless you're going to make a living from it, and because you can't make a living from it, most people should leave it to the artist. I think a number of really top scholars who've looked at art seriously have said every person should be doing art. Art should be part of every day in our life. I don't know if you've ever heard of Gina Gibney. She's a choreographer in New York. She has a therapy. It's not art therapy. What she does is she does dance studios for people who are working through difficulties and trauma. Ooh. And what she said is that in life, we experience so much fragmentation of thought and feeling. Basically, we feel in chaos all the time. But there's something about art that ties in that chaos into connections, right? You can take a bunch of crayons and make a picture out of it. You can take a bunch of stones and make I've seen some of the art where people just take stones on the beach and all of a sudden make faces out of them. And really what we're doing with art more than anything else, we are bringing meaning into chaos. Yeah.
Can I give an example?
Go ahead.
Please. Yeah, no, I was saying, and we create, like, I think that's a big I've always said, and I don't have any data to back this up. One thing that separates us from other mammals is that we create, and we need to do that. Yeah.
In fact, every society that we have any anthropological evidence of, at some point we find their art. My wife and I just got back from Europe, and one of the things I wanted to do was go through Pompeii, and so we had a chance to go through the ruins of Pompeii, and it's amazing. I always thought that it was lava that covered up Pompeii, and I didn't realize it was like 10 feet of ash. So because of that, they have been able to excavate, other than the roofs, which all collapsed, they've been able to excavate the walls, and the frescoes on the walls are like fresh. I mean, you look at them and the colors stand. I've never seen colors like that. It was these people drew them right on the wall, and I'm going like, art has always been part of the human condition, and why? And I don't even remember his name. He works for Pixar. He did Monsters Inc. Pete somebody, but he said, yeah, we make stories about toys and fish and robots and monsters. He said, but what we're really doing is we're telling stories about loss and mortality and defining who we are in the world. And when I heard his interview with him, I went, yeah, that's it. I mean, you watched the story Up. I don't know if you've seen Pixar's Up. I love it too. And
one of the best Pixar
10
movies.
minutes. What is, right? The first 10 minutes where nothing is said, and you're bawling your eyes out at the end because this guy, I don't want to spoil it for somebody who hasn't seen it, but this guy his childhood sweetheart has grown up with him and died, and he's come to his final promise that he made to her. And they haven't said a word in the entire thing, but he has made cartoon into the human experience. Everything can be art. And I mean that. And so when we look at, Gina Gibney takes these people, and all of a sudden in the midst of they're allowed to choreograph their dance, and it can be about anything. All of a sudden in the midst of their dance, they're sobbing on the floor, and it's the first time they've cried for 10 years.
Yeah.
I look at that and say, that's amazing. What art is. This is the very nature of it. If we do art every day, even for 5 minutes, it's something, it lifts something inside of us. Now, you also said that one of the signs of depression is somebody who loves art who cannot get up the energy to do it.
Yeah. And that was true for me. And then you hit a nail on the head where one of my favorite song lyrics from a lost band out of Santa Barbara, the lyric goes, if I were a poet, I could feel the beating drum, behind the material world, and I would give word to mystery, and that's always been something that has captivated me. I remember Sean Penn famously said when he was trying to describe things we don't know, what about truth? And he says, well, the mystery is the truth. And that's always captivated me, like to be okay with mystery. And I think that's why I was struggling to engage with art or create art during my time with depression, or when I was wrestling with what it is, because I didn't want to step into mystery. I needed safe, known. And I think that maybe that's why a lot of people kind of give up on art, is because they want the safe, they want the known. I saw a chart that just took the top 200 songs over the last 30 years and just ran them through an algorithm to just understand the dynamics, which is to say, volume changes, pitch changes, key changes, how dynamic has music gotten. And it seems to have fallen off a cliff since about 1997. You can see music has gotten somewhat monotone and not mysterious. I often say music kind of fell off that cliff after OK Computer, which was a phenomenal album that I introduced you to. And that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about. You grew up and you kind of led in a culture that really forsaked art for propaganda, which propaganda can be creative, don't get me wrong, but its main purpose is to make you think a specific thing, where art is just giving you a substrate to think your own thoughts. Right. And so you asked on Twitter a few years back, I missed the 90s music. I wasn't there. I wasn't listening to anything. I was stuck in the satanic panic, or I forget the word you said. You were in
contemporary Christian music. We weren't allowed to go anywhere beyond that.
Yeah. And you asked for albums, and and for me that was gold, because I was like, well, there's only one album. There's only one album to listen to, and that's Radiohead's OK Computer, because it is, in my mind, the defining creative album of the 90s. So as someone who's turned a leaf and has been engaging with culture that they missed out on, and as you age, how are you discovering new stuff, music, movies, art, film?
I am asking people what they're listening to, and I'm asking people of different age groups. I've been working with a lot of people in the BDSM, the kink community, about where I work with them in my practice. And so I asked a couple of them, I said, what are you listening to? And it's quite interesting. There's an artist by the name of Kay Flay. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's amazing, from San Francisco, or from the Bay Area. I don't know if she's from San Francisco.
How do you spell it?
K, the letter K, and then Flay is Flay. I don't remember what her actual given name is, but that's her artist name. And
she gets a lot of plays there. A big track is
she's got
400 million spins. Yeah,
she's got one song called "Blood in the Cut," and I was talking to one of my clients, and it sounds like it's a self-harm song, and it's not. What it's talking about is I have been betrayed so much, I have been hurt so much, that there comes this building tension inside me that I need to lash out. And the lyrics talk about that, but it's not talking about I want to destroy someone else. It's talking about I want to feel something. I want to get to a place where I stop feeling numb all the time because of my trauma, and I want to start feeling. So I began to listen to songs like that, and then I'm because I have ADHD as well. I tend to follow rabbit trails everywhere musically. So, I'll go on Spotify and it says, would you like some more songs just like this? I said, sure. So I started listening to a lot of other ones. And then I just build up a playlist. And, I may not listen to more than one or two songs per artist. I mean, when I did the deep dive into the 90s songs, I didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue who Soundgarden was. I mean, I hadn't even heard the name. I knew Smashing Pumpkins. I knew some other ones, but I didn't know who. And my kids all grew up in the 90s, but they were all listening to this music, but they had to do it secretly. Not that I would punish them, but they just thought that I would be disappointed with them. And unfortunately, I wouldn't have been. But my education, all of a sudden, I started to love 90s music. I mean, I got into everything from pop to just the beginnings of techno and other things. And I just tried out everything. And, temp thumping was a part of, I mean, that sounds like it's just this party song, but I thought I didn't party in the 90s. I get to party now. That's the cool thing.
Well,
and
question.
Then
did you get into some hip hop in the 90s? Because I didn't recommend any, but
I
know it's
did.
I know it's a tough turn to make for a lot of people, especially middle-aged white guys.
You know what? I didn't then. So I had a support group of therapists I'm part of, and most of them are people of color. And so they were chastising me for not getting into the artist. So I started maybe about 3 years after you gave that recommendation, others did. Yeah. I'm just starting doing it in the last 3 months. So I can't say that I want to speak on it. But
I got one for you.
Yes,
that you're going to like. His name is Prof. He's I think he's like 39 years old. He's under the radar. I've been singing his praises to people. And he's doing something different in hip hop that I've never heard before. And I don't know if it's the future, but and as I try to pitch to my kids who are big hip hop fans, they struggle with it because that's just too. And my daughter straight up said it's just too different. And his name's Prof, Prof. And you listen to the song "Squad Goals" when you get a chance.
Squad Goals, okay. I'll listen to it.
Squad Goals. There's one of my favorite verses ever because you're in the sex therapy space, and he's a brilliant lyricist. And the way he flows and sings and just it's constantly changing. Whatever if you've listened to a lot of hip hop up till now and you first listen to Prof, you're like, what is going on? I love this, but it's weird. But he has a verse in that song that I think is going to make you chuckle. And I want to hear your response on Twitter when you go. I'm going to go see him live next week with my wife.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, no, I think engaging with music is huge, and I think it's awesome that you're doing that. And we have access to the world's music now with streaming. I'm fortunate enough that when my kids were developing during that era, so they got to expose me to music. And one thing I changed, my wife and I often say, because we both grew up in very similar, restrictive households, we basically try to raise our kids basically the opposite of what our parents did. And one thing we were always open. We were always 100% open with music. If my music had like cuss words in it, even when my kids were younger, I didn't censor it. I didn't change the music I was listening to in the car when they were younger, not even the lyrics, but even just sonically. I wasn't playing them, the kids' music as much. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but how it turned out is as they aged and started to listen to their own music, they never had a second guess about being able to play their music in front of their parents, like everything. And so it's great. Even now to this day, when we get in the car, I'm like, what do you listen to? Put it on. I want to hear it. And they've introduced me to all kinds of stuff. It's been great.
Well, that's curious. Can I share a bit of my story then?
Please.
I didn't grow up in the church. My father was an atheist. My mother was a spiritist. She channeled spirits. And they were hippies, and they were into every kind of music you can possibly imagine. My dad loves jazz. He loved fusion, cool jazz, bebop. He loved every type there was. And I grew up with all that. And I grew up with heavy rock music, Jay Giles and Steppenwolf. And I grew up with all that. And even when I came into Christianity at age 14, I still listened to all that. And then all of a sudden I began, like you talked about the satanic panic. Everybody said, Bob Larson came up with his book, it talked about how the African beat was getting into your soul and it was ruining your spirit and all that. And I bought into it a little bit. I didn't buy into it a lot. But basically, then we moved to a small town in British Columbia in the mountains. And the only radio station they had was the Canadian version of public radio, and they didn't play any music. So we had no record store. So it really wasn't, it actually didn't start out because of Christianity that I did that. It was because I didn't really have any place to buy music. Then in the 90s, when I moved to Montana, we were unfortunately in a church that was heavily into the satanic panic. And so we just listened to Christian contemporary music, which is, I hate to say it, and if somebody loves it, I hate it with a passion. The
Nashville sound, we always joke.
But I never made my kids listen to anything. They could listen to whatever they wanted. I wanted them to talk to me about it. But they, because of the youth groups they were going to, they were afraid to tell me what they were listening to.
Right.
in the 2000s when I broke out of that and I said, listen, I'm not listening to that crap anymore. I want to find out what music's about. I basically started again into music in the 2000s. I just missed the 90s. Well, the 80s as well. But the 80s were easy to catch up with because half the commercials on television were 80s music. But so what happened was that my kids now come back, and my son, who for 4 or 5 years was a DJ on a local radio station here, and he promoted albums and everything. He kind of helped me get caught up with a lot of it. But I wanted albums, and you gave me one, and a number of people gave me other ones, and so I buried myself into it. But I'm going to tell you right now, all the way along, I had a guilty pleasure artist, and I listened to her in the 80s, in the 90s, and the 2000s. I still listen to her, and she has some of the most raw, and it's Madonna. And she was my lifeline through all of it.
I tell my wife all the time, she doesn't like Madonna, but I think it's more of a cultural thing, not so much the music. But I tell her all the time, there's nobody that doesn't like Madonna. She doesn't have to be your favorite, but nobody hates Madonna's music. Like, it was important. I agree.
Yeah, and she spanned every era. And I went, my God, she was kind of the one thread that kept me going in music when I was buried in CCM. Was that there was, when La Isla Bonita came out, I thought that is the greatest song I've ever heard. And it's still, when I listen to it, it just,
great.
Can I go a
music.
Different direction now with music though?
Please.
Just for a second.
This is open. Go.
So it's not just music, but it's sound. There is, in psychology right now, they're beginning to realize that one of the modalities that works for a lot of people is that, using certain wavelengths and certain frequencies can actually signal parts of your brain to calm down and to release. Now, we always knew that about alpha waves, right? There was always certain frequencies that did it, but we're finding there are many more frequencies that the 852 hertz frequency or megahertz frequency tends to bring people into a sense of calm and serenity. There's some that tend to bring creativity. There's some that tend to help anger get expressed. And so in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been experimenting myself. I have a nerve condition called benign fasciculation syndrome, and it just causes twitching all through my legs day and night.
Okay.
But I found some frequencies in the 5 to 8 hertz range that when I start playing them, all of a sudden my twitching stops. And it just stops. And I've been doing that now for about 3 years. And the more I get very narrow into the field. And so there's been music created that uses those frequencies in the background. And a lot of them are on YouTube and Spotify and, Google Music and other or I guess that's YouTube now. Anyways, I'm just, for people listening, start looking at ways that sound itself can bring some healing to the brain.
There's a song. Have you heard "Weightless" by Barconi Union?
Yes.
Yeah, that song is psychology.com says it reduces anxiety by 65% by listening. And I've done it. I've put that track in my headphones and laid on the floor, and it works. So I've experienced what you're saying, and it is fantastic. I get it.
And even some of the meditation apps like Calm and others are using. Yeah. I know that they've even named some of the frequencies: green noise, brown noise, pink noise, and so on, white noise, and they really do work. I mean, there's a lot of experimentation in it right now, and I think that's good because. But if people want to do a deep dive into it, I think it'll pay off for just about anybody.
No, I wholeheartly agree, and so when I'm picking music, whether I'm driving around the house, I always select based on the energy of the moment and what I need. That's kind of how I pick music. Just go with what the latest, my wife's more, and I love the way she listens to music too. She'll get a new album, like Post Malone's new album. She's just spinning it nonstop, like for a month. And then she'll move on to the next new album that she finds and where I'm like, okay, what is the moment? What do I need right now in the moment? So I have like a breakfast playlist on Spotify. As soon as I get up in the morning, I turn that on, and it's just it reminds me of the quiet music that's playing in the grocery store when you go there early in the morning and nobody's there. Like it's soothing, it's because I need a slow morning. I need I tell people I need 2 hours to turn my brain on in the morning. Is really before my brain needs to do anything meaningful. I need about 2 hours. And so totally agree on.
Well, the
just
entire universe. I mean, you put me onto a book by Irvin Laszlo a number of years ago. I don't know if you remember
Love
it.
that book.
And one of the things that, I mean, he didn't come up with this idea, but he champions that everything in the universe is energy. Everything in the universe is connected. And therefore, the energies that are flowing around us, if we can understand how they're affecting us, we can perhaps manipulate them to affect us in the way that we want them to. And we see that with sound. We see that with the visual, right? I mean, there are times that you can look at a piece of art. I have to share this. This is the weirdest story. It just happened last week.
But while we're on that book, I want to say that it's Science in the Akashic Field by Irvin Laszlo.
Yes. Yeah.
Great book. Yeah.
I highly recommend it.
Same.
Yeah, it's a great book. My wife and I this is the trip of a lifetime. We've been saving up for years to go to Europe, and we did all the bucket list stuff. But the last day of the trip was in Mallorca, Spain, and we took a little train up in the mountains, and there's a tiny little town. At the moment, I can't remember what it was called, but we were waiting for another train to go back, and in the train station, I should back up. We'd been in Barcelona a couple of weeks before, and we wanted to go to the big museum there, the Picasso Museum, and we couldn't get tickets. There was so many people going, we couldn't get tickets, and we were kind of bummed out by that. So here we are in this little tiny town, and we went into the train station. I went into the bathroom, and hanging in the bathroom is a sculpture by Picasso.
Like a real one, not a replica.
No. It's an actual sculpture. And I did the same thing. This can't possibly be. But then I went out, and right beside the bathroom is this tiny little room, which is, I guess, the guy who designed and built this train station was Picasso's best friend, and so and fellow artist. And so when he built it, he asked Picasso to just make some stuff and donate it and put it in there. And one of them they hung in the bathroom. I'm going like, who hangs a Picasso in a public bathroom? And the answer came, people who honor art in every part of their life.
Yeah. I
thought, I want to start doing that. And so what I've been doing over the last few years, I have a condition called aphantasia. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But it's about 1 in 10,000 people have it. I can't visualize anything in my head. I literally I close my eyes. I can't see anything. I see gray images.
Yeah,
probably the opposite of a lot of people, right?
Yeah,
and therefore it's impossible for me to imagine something. I have no ability to imagine something, not with my eyes closed.
Right.
But what has helped me over the years are tools like Photoshop and others. In this case, Photoshop Elements, where I can take a picture and then I can manipulate it, even using AI. And I know AI is kind of in the art community now is like swearing, but I can manipulate it so I can create something different out of it. I don't know if it shows up, but behind me there, you see that picture on the wall, the three.
Yeah.
So I took that picture a number of years ago. I was down on the coast near Jenner, California. I love picture.
Jenner, California. That's my daughter's middle name.
Oh, okay. It's a great town near that, and that's right by Goat Rock. And
I was there 2 weeks ago.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah,
I love that place, and
that's the best coffee shop in the world. I want to say
it's what?
The best coffee shop in the world is right there in Jenner, Cafe Aquatica.
Yes, it is. In fact, that picture was taken from the deck, sitting in one of those Adirondack chairs in the coffee shop.
Love it. Yep.
Okay, so we're on the same page. So I took the picture, and I just thought it was a serene picture, and I came back and I started manipulating it through Photoshop just to, get the tint right and everything. Yeah. And what I came up with, I said, this picture is art. And so I just sent it in to Shutterfly, and they, with the frameless pictures, sent it back. And my wife and I started talking. We've got a lot of pictures like that we can make into art, and we're now going to do it in every room in our house. The example of, she said, the bathroom. I said, yes, the bathroom. Let's let this little town in Mallorca give the example for including art in even if it gets a little bit crowded. I just want to start doing art everywhere. I want to remind myself that my life is art.
And your art too, which is even better. I do a lot of photography. That's kind of how I've expressed my art, and so and got my son into it. Yeah, I put my photos out just for myself to see, and it's helpful. Not just to have it to see it, but have an outlet for my creativity to be able to do something.
Exactly. And I know you like doing music. I have my Taylor 214 guitar that I play every once in a while. My wife bought me a little kit for Christmas on how to do resin art, and it became a black hole I'm throwing my money into now. I've got about $5,000 in supplies. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, you got to tinker. You got to do something. I mean, that's what makes us human. Make something. Cook if that's all you have.
Cook.
Like learn to art. Cook. My wife loves to garden to express your creativity. I totally agree. So as we wrap up, a couple quick questions, Mike.
Sure.
First concert, best concert that you've been to.
First concert
you can remember going to.
Oh, I remember this one really clearly. Yeah. It was a British group came over to the town we were in. The group was called 10 Years After. Okay. And they were part of the British invasion, early 70s groups, very much like Led Zeppelin, not as well known, but I adored that concert simply because it was the first one I went to, and I'll never forget it. The best one was, it was Doobie Brothers in Chicago. And I went up there for my 30th birthday. So
what venue did they play?
It was at the, what is it called? United Center, I think.
United Center now, yeah. It would have been Chicago
I
Arena.
I don't remember what it was then, but
I think it was just Chicago Arena. Yeah,
I think
great show.
Oh, my
great
goodness.
show.
It was. I think it was Michael McDonald was with them at that time, and it was just amazing.
Michael McDonald's on my breakfast playlist. He's just got a soothing voice.
If anybody has not seen it, the video that the Doobie Brothers did during the pandemic, where they all did from their own studios at home, and they put Blackwater together Blackwater together. It's on YouTube. It is.
I'm linking that up in the notes.
And Michael McDonald makes a surprise insertion into it. The rest of the guy, only one of the guys knew that he was going to do it, but he shows up in the whole thing. It's great.
That's awesome. And then movies. What is your favorite movie? And for me, it changes from time to time. But what's your favorite movie all time? Right now.
All time right now.
Might change. Or what's one like when you need to recommend
Princess
a movie?
Bride is our family. Princess Bride is our family favorite.
We can't go wrong there. Yeah.
I like What About Bob?
Fantastic.
I can't get enough of that. In more serious movies, A Beautiful Life is. I've watched it so many times. He absolutely nails it. I mean, he gets schizophrenia. I mean, there's a good reason that he won the Academy Award for Best Actor. I mean, it was just so A Beautiful Mind would probably be my favorite serious one. And then What About Bob would be the comedy. And then Lord of the Rings is, I mean, it's in my blood. My claim to fame, throw this out there. I have read Lord of the Rings 38 times.
I believe it.
I just can't get enough of it.
That's awesome. No, it's that's a comfort movie for me. A rainy day, I'll watch one of the Lord of the Rings. Try to remember which one I'm on and go through them. But yeah,
and I was back before IRC. I was in one of the chat groups back in 1991. We had a Lord of the Rings group long before the movies were, and one of the guys in that group was Peter Jackson.
Oh.
And one of the things that we were talking about in the group is if there was ever another Lord of the Rings movie, I mean, they made that stupid little one in the early 80s. If there was ever another Lord of the Rings movie, we were saying who we would love to play different roles. And I don't know if Peter Jackson was taking notes. He never did any of our ideas, but we found out later that because we all had synonyms, of course, but he admitted in an interview that he'd been part of that group, and I kept trying to push Uma Thurman for Galadriel, but it never got any traction. So
I'm an Uma Thurman fan. So is my wife.
Yeah.
Well, great, Mike. Thanks for taking the time to be on the pod. great insight. I love your heart. When we first met, maybe in like 2004 or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I've just enjoyed our friendship, but always enjoyed your heart, your mind, and just your connection to humans. So thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Big stunner, 100. You stupid, just shut up. Keep breezy, I'm gonna. I'm big boy, dun dun.